Hello, Dylan here, and welcome to Advent of Code Day 6, 2025 in Python. If you find today's solution helpful, please like this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comments down below. And if you're interested in seeing today's code, you can find it in the GitHub link in the description. So without further ado, let's begin part 6. So after reading through part 6 here, it seems like we have fallen down some garbage smasher, and we can get out with the help of these cephalopods, basically squid or octopi. But while they work on doing that, they ask us for help with the math homework. And so this is the math homework, where here it looks like each column represents one problem. So for example, 123, 45, 6 all multiplied together. 328, 64, 98 all summed together. So if we solve all of these problems, we need to find what is the total of all these solutions. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code. So I don't think this is going to be too crazy. What I want to do is first split up all the values in these lists, turn them into ints, and then rearrange the lists so that each item in the list or each row in our data should be these numbers in order rather than all the numbers across. Okay, and actually I've gone ahead and pasted in the example input just because it's shorter, and I want to kind of show you guys the parsing as we go along. So let's go ahead and we are going to say that data is equal to parse data, and then for line in data we will print line. And I'm just going to do this so I can show you the steps of the parsing as we go. So the first thing that we will do is we'll say data is equal to d.split. And we're just going to split on the spaces for d in data. And return data. So if we go ahead and run this, you can see we've split up the numbers and the signs successfully. So the next step is we're going to convert all those to ints. Okay, and we'll just take int of I for I in D, for D in data, and we'll take everything except for the very last line, because obviously we won't be converting signs to numbers. So if I return nums now instead of data and give this another run, then you can see now that we have integers. And the last thing I want to do is change these lists. So instead of having 3 lists of 4, we should have 4 lists of 3, where each list represents one column. So we'll go ahead and say nums is equal to, and we'll make a list within a list, line of I for line in nums, and we'll say for I in range of length of data 0. So the line number that we check here is kind of arbitrary. I just chose the first one. So basically it's just saying for each one in column 0, each one in column 1, each one in column 3, each one in column 4, make a list. And then finally we'll return nums, and we also want to return the signs. So that would be just data and the very last row here. So now if I make data and signs equal to parse, and we run this again, you'll see now that each list represents one vertical column rather than a horizontal row. So now we can go ahead and start with the code. So I'll just go ahead and say that grand total is equal to 0, and then we'll say for I in the range of the length of the signs. And basically what we want to do is calculate either a sum or a product. So I'm going to actually put that in a separate function. Say def calculate, which will take some numbers and a sign. And so if the sign is the plus sign, then we can just return the sum of the numbers. Otherwise, our total is equal to 1. And for num in nums, total will be times equals to num. and then we can just return total. So down here in our loop for I in range length of signs, we will just say grand total will be incremented by calculate of data I and signs I. And if we go ahead and return our grand total and run our code, let me not make a mistake here. For I in range, then we get this number, which is actually the number for our test data. So using our actual problem input here, we'll just run for day 6 and let's test out this number here. And submitting, and okay, that looks good. So let's take a look at part 2. Now, according to part 2, we actually didn't know the rules of encephalopod math. And so it turns out they actually read from right to left. So in fact, that means we would now have a situation where we have 4 plus 431 plus 632 or 623. And then 175, 581, 23 or 32 all multiplied and so on. So basically what we need to do this time is we need to read column by column, and then when we find the end of one section of numbers, we should perform the operation, the calculate. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code. So this time we can ignore our earlier parse function, and I'll just say data and signs are equal to data, everything except the last line, and then the last line. And I want to find all the columns that the operators appear in, because that will tell us when we've reached the end of a block of numbers. So I'll just say that the sign columns is an empty list, and then for I in range, and we'll take the length of signs, if signs I is equal, or let's say is in, plus or asterisk, then sign columns dot append I. So now we have all of our markers. So now we'll go ahead and read the input right to left, finding all the numbers read vertically. And when the end of a block is reached, meaning when we've reached a sign column, calculate the sum or product. So what will we do? We'll say a total, a grand total, is equal to 0. And then we'll say that our column will start at the length, and we'll just say of data 0. So we'll start all the way on the right side of data, and while the column is greater than or equal to 0, so while it's in range, then first let's read all the numbers in the block. So we'll say that numbers is a new list. The numbers for this block is a new list, and while not column plus 1 in sign columns. So basically, while our column index is not on the blank column that separates blocks of data, we will just go ahead and say that the number is equal to row and column for row in data. So what this means is for each row in the data, only take the digit or the blank space that is in that column index that we're currently on. And then we can append this into nums, but currently it would be, for example, this one right here, blank, 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 9. Or in this one, 2, 4, 8, 1 as separate string items. So we'll just go ahead and say that we'll go nums, append, and we're going to convert to an int, And right now, these are all, each digit is its own item in the list. So we need to join that together. And we'll just join none. So that should be good. And let's keep moving on to the left with column minus equals 1. So this will stop when it has reached the blank column here, meaning that we've reached the end of the block. And now we'll just calculate the number that we should add to the grand total. So now grand total, and we can reuse the calculate function from before. Grand total of calculate nums and signs. And remember, the column index right now is on the blank one, so we need to go back to the right one more to get the correct sign. So we'll just say column and add back 1. And then at the very end right now, like I said, one more time, we're on the blank list. So let's move the column over to the starting column on the next block with column minus equals 1. So I think this should be good. And if we go ahead and return our grand total at the end, we run this code again, we can see that we actually have a string index out of range. And I think I know why that is the problem. If we check the very end of our data, I suppose there's a possibility where this last line C here is not the same length as all the other lines. And that could happen, like, say if we had even like 5 and then a space at the end. Especially if we're reading in our file input and R stripping, we're going to lose that last one. So these actually won't be the same length. So let's go ahead and fix that. I guess I will use another parse function. So I'll just call this parse2 of data. And I'm just going to make sure that every line in the list is the same length. So I'll say the longest is equal to the max of the length of a line for line and data. So that's just the length of the longest line. And we'll say for I in range length of data, while length of data I is less than longest, let's just add blank spaces to the end of that line. Data I plus equals a space. And then since we're here, why don't we just return the numbers and the signs as separate lists. So now fixing our part 2, we'll say data and signs is parse2 data. And if we go ahead and run this again, okay, and taking a look at what I did wrong here, this column here should definitely start at length of data 0 minus 1. Otherwise, it would be out of range of all our data from the get-go. So now let's go ahead and run this one last time and test our answer. Okay, and there we go. We've got the solution. So there was day 6 of Advent of Code for 2025. If you liked the solution or found it helpful, please leave a like, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.